So, welcome officially. Welcome to this Chalktalk, hosted by Garage 61 and Sim Racer Academy. This is the first of what we hope might be more than one. Who knows? And I guess a good evening, good afternoon, and maybe even good morning, because for me it's still morning. I'm in Seattle in the U.S., originally from Vancouver, Canada, but just down the road in Seattle. So I'm on West Pacific Coast time, and that means it's 11 o'clock in the morning. And some of you, it's in the evening. So welcome to this Chalktalk. I'm Ross Bentley, and a real quick little background before we get going here. I started racing before there were simulators, before simulators had been invented. So that was way back in 1979. And I know some of you are going, 1979? I wasn't born. I was like 20 years away from being born or whatever. So been at this for a long time. I've raced for a long time. I raced Indy cars. I raced an IMSA. I raced all sorts of different kinds of cars. So did that. And I've been coaching for 30 plus years as well. And I got to say, so I started using simulators, though, in like early 2000s. I think I got my first sim in 2003, so over 20 years ago. So I've been using sims, but I've been using a sim mostly as a driver training tool as opposed to sim racing. And so that's sort of where my background in all of this comes from. And one of the things I noticed, so I coach drivers of every level, from club racing, amateurs to professionals. I mean, I can now count a Le Mans winner, an Indy 500 winner, and a Daytona 500 winner amongst the drivers that I've coached in real life. And so I coach drivers in all over the place. But one of the things that I noticed was when I first started kind of really paying attention to the way sim racers practice, is they tend to just they get really good by tons of repetition. And you know the old saying, practice makes perfect. Well, it doesn't. Only perfect practice makes perfect. And I saw some sim racers practicing tons of repetition of the wrong things. And I come from the real world coaching situation where, hey, every lap of the track costs hundreds, if not many thousands of dollars per lap. And in that case, my job as a driver coach is to help drivers learn more in less time. And that's how I kind of really got involved with helping sim racers, was starting this Sim Racer Academy, kind of applying my coaching techniques to helping sim racers learn more in less time. So that's my background. Last year, Balázs Remenyik joined Sim Racer Academy as our chief instructor and has been absolutely amazing. So Balázs, do you mind giving a little bit of your background and some of your background and experience?
Yeah, absolutely. Hello, everyone. My name is Balázs, and I'm from Hungary. I'm in Budapest at the moment, so I'm one of the people who is in the evening at the moment. I'm 27, and I've been sim racing for a long time, must be 15 years now, in whatever level. Whenever I had the chance, I've been sim racing, and I've been part of professional sim racing organizations as well. Currently between changing teams, but I am still doing it professionally. And since the end of 2023, I've been also the official simulator driver for the Maserati Formula E team. And now I'm going into my second season with the team. Apart from that, I've been coaching on simulators since 2020. And but now that Ross has said it, I can say that I also coached in the sim real life Indy 500 winner. So I don't have the rest of the achievements yet, but I have that one.
Yeah.
And yes, exactly as Ross said it, we've linked up early in 2024. And we figured that this would be a good partnership, and has been going on since then. And we've been trying to grow the Sim Racer Academy as much as possible in the last part, and trying to figure out how we can provide better educational content for everyone joining us.
Cool. So I like the, haven't had those other champions yet. Yeah.
Yes, we will see.
Yeah. And a huge thank you to Ruben and Garage 61. Ruben, I just say hello and give whatever background you want. I think most people on here know Garage 61. Pretty
Yeah,
sure.
I guess it needs no introduction to most of us. I see familiar names in the chat. So hi everyone, nice to meet you. I'm Ruben. I'm by far the worst driver of the three of us, guaranteed. But I know how to make software. So I'm the guy who makes most of Garage 61. I want to thank these two guys to actually bring some of their knowledge. Like they're way too modest because they have a ton of, let's say, interesting expertise on how to be a better driver, which is, I guess, something we all aspire to be. So could be a very interesting thing today.
Thank you. And so this Chalktalk is focused on driving. We don't want to get sort of in the weeds of technical discussions and questions and things like that. But what I'm going to do is ask you to just type in your question in the chat area. You'll see to the right, there's chat and there's Q&A only. And you would think that you would put your questions in the Q&A only, but we're only going to monitor the chat side of things. So we'll keep it all in one place. It's a whole lot easier for us to monitor. I have our moderator who will be handing me notes and things like that and some of your questions. But so as we go along, if you have questions, again, about driving, we can talk a little bit about, car setup changes, that kind of stuff. Questions like that. If it's like a technical thing, again, about, what brake pedal to use and that kind of thing, you're welcome to, you're welcome to send emails to Balázs at speedsecrets.com. And I'll remind you of that later as well. So you can get into that. If it's a really technical thing about Garage 61, well, we've got the expert here. But we kind of want this to be focused on driving technique and how to be a better driver and how to drive consistently faster. So, and race consistently better. So that's what it is. So feel free to type in your questions over there, and we will just think of this as we're sitting around in a pub talking about questions and driving and sim racing and stuff like that. So and as we go along, there is one question I'm actually going to kind of just throw out to Balázs here right at the very beginning, is because it's a question that I get asked often, is what is the best way to practice leading up to an event? And Balázs, I mean, go into as much detail or little detail as you want, and then we'll jump into some of these other questions that are starting to come in here now.
All right. Well, for sim racing, I would say just prioritizing the right things. I think that's the motto that you can use for preparing for a race. And by that, I mean that you need to realize what race you are going to be participating in and what is the most important aspect of that. So, for example, you are participating in the 24 Hours of Le Mans. You are not really going to be focusing your practice on qualifying, but you are doing an IndyCar race around Long Beach. Then qualifying is quite a crucial part of the race because it's difficult to overtake. So you need to focus on getting a good grid position, which is not necessarily the thing for a 24-hour race. So I would say try to. I think my webcam disappeared. So try to focus on what is the most important for the race. So, for example, now I think many people have the 24 Hours of Daytona coming up. There, of course, you are focusing on race pace, consistency, and tire wear is what you need to be looking for. So, yes, I would say that find the right priorities, as we all have limited time in the day. So make sure that you use the practice to the best way possible and practice the thing that's going to likely give you the best chance for a good result.
So one of the things I'll add here is during practice, typically what we do is we find the best setup we can for the car, and then we drive that car all the time. And one of the things that I've done with a lot of real world drivers and sim racers is I've actually deliberately made the car handle poorly. I've deliberately made the car numb on corner entry, so it understeered on corner entry, or real loose going into power, or corner entry instability. Like, deliberately make some changes to the setup that you probably will never drive, but when you drive that and you practice like that, you then get you get better. You're basically building your toolbox of ways to drive your car, and then you put the car back to your baseline setup or your baseline good setup. 9 times out of 10, you end up driving a little bit faster, but definitely more consistent as well. So don't be afraid to take some practice time to do things that are a little bit out of the box. And, and even like, the obvious is during practice, drive some alternate lines like you are passing or defending. So drive some alternate lines as well. So with that, Robin, we've got a couple of questions going, or we got a few questions. And by the way, if we get going here and there's like just tons and tons of questions, be patient and wait just a little bit before you put yours in there, just so we can kind of keep up with things. So Sammy asked, what strengths do you feel sim racers bring to the real world? Boy, this is a big one. To me, first off, it's the learning how to learn. Yeah, and I think, again, this is one of the advantages of sim racing, is because you can spend more time, you can try more things. And sim racers don't seem to be, like, good sim racers are not afraid to try things. And I see a lot of drivers in the real world who are afraid to try things. So I'm going to say that's the very first thing that comes to mind. To me, racecraft, you just get so much experience in racecraft is super valuable. Yes, it's a little bit different because you have different abilities to be aware of other cars around you, but that's actually, I think, a good thing. I think that for most sim racers, you don't have a lot of that kinesthetic, a lot of that feel, and because of that, you learn how to use other senses, your visual and your auditory, more. So when you get in a real car and you're going, oh, now I can feel the car, it's even better. And there was one last thing I was going to throw in there was, anyways, I'll think about it later, Sammy. But great question.
Let me quickly add to that. Like,
yes.
If you see Max Verstappen like overtaking a guy on the outside of Blanchimont, and then a video pops up from a few weeks earlier where he was training this in iRacing, or I remember him doing like an overtake move earlier this year in Miami where he clearly did like the sim racing undercut move. I think track time and racecraft is indeed what you mentioned. Like we get so much more into each different scenario compared to like a real world driver. So there is some value there, I guess.
And actually, sir, the one other thing I was going to throw in, thanks, Ruben, that really good point. One of the other things I was going to throw in is sim racers will drive as many different tracks in, it seems like, 2 months as many race drivers will in their career. Like, you just get an opportunity to learn so many different tracks, and you learn how to learn those tracks quickly. So that's a really big thing. I see Max and I see Lando Norris and people like that showing up at tracks early on when in their career, and they were going to tracks that they'd never driven before, but they learned them really, really quickly, and that's a big thing. So, Ruben, this is, and well, I think this is for both of you guys, but the question about Garage 61 about iRacing tire model has been drivers' attention for years now. What's in iRacing's tire model that may make sim drivers differ from real drivers? What do you guys think?
Well, I would say that notoriously the iRacing tire model is being called too sensitive usually, especially to sliding, small sliding. So I would say that what's a little bit different is that on iRacing, you would usually have to underdrive the car a little bit, trying to avoid any sliding, where you might be able to get away with a little bit more in real life. That's probably the thing that you are making the biggest difference with. And I'd say that's what really differs from real life at the moment.
Yeah. So for those of you who don't know, so my background, I'm a computer scientist. But I also, like a couple of years ago, went back to school and studied race engineering. But I still approach this from a computer scientist standpoint, and the fact that they have to model something as complex as rubber in a computer, which rubber is a very special thing. Like nobody really understands why it behaves this way and why it does certain things. And it's one of these materials that we still cannot properly replicate synthetically. So rubber is a weird thing. And trying to emulate that in math formulas in a simulator in a way that is still performant is extremely hard. So there are corner cases where iRacing or any sim basically gets it wrong because there are only so many things you can express in math. And I'm pretty sure that the formulas for the tire model you can probably fill a wall with them and they still will not approach to real life. So that's why there will always be differences. But it's a fact of life. And the good thing is it's the same for everybody on the simulator anyway. So you just have to embrace it.
Exactly. And I will tell you that I've done some work where with a LMP2 car and tire modeling and where we would, after every real world test or race, drivers would come back, get on our sim and spend hours working with our sim engineer to go, you know what, on cold tires, this tire comes in a little too quickly or too slowly. When I've got hot brakes but cold tires, for example, in an endurance race, things like that. So we would then keep tweaking that tire model. Now, that was not in iRacing, but it's, as Ruben says, it's a little bit of a black magic art there, but the important thing is everybody's got the same thing, so it's learning how to do that. And going back to the question of how does that help you help a driver in the real world is the more sensitive you get to that, the better you are when you get in a real car as well. So Oliver asked, what does brake migration in GTP stuff do, and how can I use it for my braking? So real quickly, just brake migration, and this brings a little memory of probably 6 years ago when the very first LMP3 cars were coming out. The Ligier chassis had a problem with brake migration. And brake migration is essentially, as you brake and you get load going onto those front tires, obviously they're doing more work than the rears. But how quickly the bias, and that's why we have brake bias, correct? We have, some 57% of the braking handled by the front tires, for example, and 43 in the rear, for example. And it's just different for every car and track conditions, all sorts of things. But let's say it's 57, 43. When you first just barely touch the brake pedal, well, the fronts aren't doing 50%, 57% of the braking. They might only be doing 51%. And then the harder you get in the brakes, they're doing more and more and more until they max out at 57. Well, if you have the brakes where they immediately, the front brakes are going to 57% immediately, you're going to lock up those front brakes too quickly. So there's this migration of how much bias you have as you are applying the brakes or releasing the brakes. And it's a big, big deal. When those first LMP3 cars came out, the initial hit of the brake pedal, too much of the brake bias went to the rear. And drivers, experienced drivers, would hit the brakes and the thing would snap and they would spin and crash the car. And it wasn't until we figured out how to adjust the brake bias and the balance bars and all sorts of stuff and the mechanical part of working the brake cylinders that we could manage the brake bias or the brake migration part of it. Now there's so much of that that is done electronically in the GTP cars because they're brake by wire. Some of them are just brake by wire to the rear and not to the front, but now they can start to change that migration. So Balázs, I know you've got a bunch of experience racing the GTP car. Thoughts?
Yeah, exactly as you say. So it's modifying the brake balance as you are applying or releasing the brakes. That's what it does technically. And what you are looking for that, of course, is you are looking to adjust your balance on the corner entry. That's what you are going to use it for. That has a lot of variables what you want to use it. Of course, it depends a little bit on your braking as well. But it can really help you. Well, you need to have good trail braking still to do it, but it can help you do it even better to help rotate the car. It's always going to be helping for that. And additionally, it can also be something to use for tire wear adjustments. So, for example, if you're arriving to a hairpin, you don't really want the system to push the brake bias really back as you are releasing it, because then you are going to get sort of a handbrake effect almost. And then you're going to realize in a couple of laps that, you are kind of overheating the tires at that point. I think there was even one of the F1 races where one of the drivers was recommended to do this, to use more migration, and he just said on the radio, no, because it's going to overheat the tires.
Yeah, that whole migration thing is it's an interesting part of car setup and things. So just to kind of go on that, well, how do you find the right setup there? Well, I'm going to say, as an engineer friend of mine says, you learn a lot more from experimentation than you do from experience. You could have somebody that's got 30 years of experience, but if they've been doing the exact same thing for 30 years, they're not going to be as good as somebody who's got 3 years of experience, but experimented a lot. So one of the great things about sim racing and sim racing practice is try things, just experiment. And, definitely if you've got adjustments in bias or whatever, and, kind of do a sweep, go from this end to this end and see what that feels like. And then
Exactly.
way,
Exactly. Whenever I do it, even during a race, what I do is just, okay, let's say this corner feels understeery on the entry, then I go a bit for rearwards migration on the corner entry. I do a couple of laps with 1 or 2 steps more. I see how it feels. I like it or don't like it, and then I change it based on that, or leave it if I liked it.
Yeah. And actually, it's another thing, going back to the first question around what is it that sim racers learn that help them in the real world. It's that willingness to experiment on the go even. So this kind of goes back to the very first question a little bit that I asked you, Balázs, is Simon and Artem both ask how the perfect training session should look like. What do you think the perfect training session should look like? And I know, so one of my favorite sayings in life is, it depends, because it depends so much on where you are with your driving, what car, all sorts of things. But, is it a track you've been to before or seen before? Not one. But anyways, Balázs, what does the perfect training session look like for you?
Well, I can say that I had the same thought as you, that it depends for what it is. But, let's say you're not focusing on driving technique, but adjusting setup, then obviously that means there's a reason you are doing that. You want to get one place to another with your car setup. So that means you need to address the issues that you are having with the car. So I think that's what we can say perfect practice is, addressing issues or problems that you might have with car balance. But that also works for the driving technique. If you know that you have something that you need to work on, then you need to be addressing that. And I would say what makes the practice most efficient is that you are addressing the most important ones. So you can even make yourself a list of what you want to work on. Let that be driving technique or a car balance issue, and you do that based on the importance. If there's a corner where you constantly lose it, that's going to be the most important one, because without that you're not going to be able to complete the race. So make it a list of importance and work based on that. And of course, the perfect practice is if you can go through all of them and that you are happy with the result.
And one thing that I'll add to here is, and I will say that this has been a key to my success as a coach, has been breaking things down into little chunks and just practicing little chunks at a time. And if football teams, and I don't care if you're talking about football for the rest of the world or American football, but if football teams practice the way most sim racers and race drivers, real world race drivers practice, they would just show up for a practice and they'd play a game. But they don't do that. They do drills. They break it down into specific skills, or things could be car setup stuff. But the more you break it down and you practice little chunks, that's going to make you're going to be more efficient in learning whatever it is that you prioritize. So if you said, hey, I want to get better at corner entry speed. Well, don't go on and just practice turning laps and seeing what your lap times are. No, deliberately practice on just trying different things in terms of your corner entry, how you release the brakes, where you're looking, the line and how quickly you turn the wheel, those kinds of things. So be really deliberate and very specific. And the more you do that, the more efficient and effective your practice is going to be. Hey, Ruben asked a question. I wonder who Ruben is.
And it's a perfect segue because it fits into this.
How do you recognize bad habits?
Or going back to your last question, like how do you recognize what to focus on, what your weaknesses are?
Balázs, you want to go first on this? Yeah, of course. I think always you need a reference for that. And for that, Garage 61 is a great tool, being able to find a reference. And if you are looking for bad habits in your driving, let's say you are comparing data now, you have the chance to compare data with someone, then you need to look for consistently different things that you do. If you are doing something wrong, let's say with the braking, you're not braking enough or something, you will quickly realize that, okay, you lose 2/10 in every corner. That means, okay, there is something almost fundamentally wrong, or something that you do very differently. And then you are looking for those, let's say, bigger things in the driving, braking point, braking, and that sort of stuff. I'd say that's it. Always find the reference.
And I'll say, data is like that's your starting point in terms of identifying bad habits. And one of the things that I look for when I'm looking at data is even if I don't have anybody else to compare to, if all I did was I compared my speed trace and I overlaid 5 of my laps, and I went, they're all pretty the same, but there's one corner where the variation between speed is greater. I'm going, there's something I'm doing wrong in that corner because I haven't quite got it figured out and I'm inconsistent in that area. So I look for inconsistencies in the data. That's the very first thing. And one other thing that I strongly recommend to sim racers is, at some point in time, there's, you can look at data all day long, but at some point in time, if you just took your phone, set it up, and you took video of your feet, for example, just pointed at your feet and then play back your video and watch what you're doing with your feet. And it's surprising how many sim racers have come back to me and said, oh, I didn't realize that, when I'm taking my foot and when I come off the pedal, I'm kind of lifting it up in the air rather than just working it like this. Same thing here. Or, I see the way my foot goes down, and when I'm coming off, it's kind of like in steps. And I'm like, no, it should be smooth. So those are things that are sometimes easier to see with just a quick little video. I also say stick your phone back here on a tripod or whatever, and have it looking over your shoulder. And you may notice things there that you don't see any other way. I've seen sim racers who they're driving like this. Their eyes, I don't know if you can actually see me, they're like barely moving their head. And you can kind of get away with that, but the more you turn your head and look into the corners, and that's something that you may not even notice until you're kind of noticing from back here. So little things like that to try at some point in time. Ruben, one last thing I'll say about your question is I say this a lot, is if you want to know what that special thing that Max Verstappen does, that special technique that he does driving a Formula One car, you want to know what it is that makes him better than everybody else. He just does the basics better than everybody else. That's all it is. He doesn't do anything super trick. He doesn't turn the steering wheel with his nose or brake with his kneecap. Like he just does the basics better than everybody else. So sometimes it's so important, I think, that you just go, I'm just going to work on my initial application of the brake pedal, or how I'm easing off that pedal, how I'm turning the wheel. Am I quickly with the wheel, or bending it in, or sitting in the car? Like really think about what are the basics and go back and practice those. Okay.
Just to add to that, Ross, we also have a really good question regarding practice. Is whether the iRacing's active reset is a good way to practice. I don't know how much you know about that, but it is basically, you can set a waypoint up on the lap, and you can constantly reset to that, where the car state, the fuel, the tires, everything resets to the same point. And I think my answer to that is absolutely, it's a really great way to practice, but we cannot overdo it. I think overdoing it is an issue. But if you realize that somewhere you need to focus practice on, let's say that's a corner or a section, yes, it's a great way. You can do consistently 5-10 attempts, but then I would recommend to just go back to doing laps, not to overdo it in a way that you just focus on that, because then you are not going to be gaining anything from it. It is actually even becomes frustrating to just run the same corner over and over again.
Yeah, don't want to lose the rhythm of putting the lap together as well. But I love that reset thing. So Xavier asked, on which variables do maximizing the apex speed depend? Interesting question. What variables? Well, I'm going to say, again, this is one of my all-time favorite things, the timing and rate of release of the brake pedal. That has more to do with anything else. So what I think about, and I actually created this video. If you go to speedsecrets.com, you go to playbooks, there's a playbook here I call The Anatomy of a Corner. And I go through this whole thing. And one of the things that I really kind of like broke the whole cornering sequence down. And we think about braking as, well, I hit the brakes at the 3 marker or the 400 marker or the 200 or whatever it is, right? But there's a begin of braking, there's an end of braking, and there's a zone, a braking zone. And in that braking zone, just prior to corner entry, just prior to that point where you start to turn in and start to release the brake pedal in there, there's a decision that you make. And the decision is, oh my God, I'm going too fast. I got to hang on the brakes a little longer. Or it could be, oh, I've overslowed. I'm going to start to release the brake pedal a little bit more and start to roll a little bit more speed in. And at the same time, you're thinking about how quickly am I going to come off the brake pedal? And, is it a quick release to really kind of like let the car run free and let the car come in there, more so in a fast corner? Or if it's a tight hairpin corner, like this kind of a thing, where you're going to, like, you really want to kind of ease off the brakes really slowly to help get the car turn. all of that's going on. And I will say that that's something that if you specifically practiced on Xavier, where you took some time and all you did was you focused on that point just prior to corner entry where you're thinking about, am I overslowing or underslowing? And think about the timing and rate of release of the brakes. The timing being, when do I start to release? When do I start to release in relationship to the turn in? So I could start to release and then start turning in, or I could turn in and release at the same time, or I can start turning in and then start to release. And then the rate of release could be a quick release, or it could be a really slow release. And just take practice sessions where all you do is you practice that part of that. And I'm going to say that's going to make the difference. And, there's a whole thing around your minimum speed in a corner, right? If your minimum speed is too high, it's going to delay you getting back to power. If your minimum speed is too low, you're going to be starting to accelerate from too low a speed. So it's figuring out where or what that minimum speed is. And then where is that minimum speed in the corner? Is it early in the corner? Is it late in the corner? And then how long are you at the minimum speed? So there's so much there that, you need to go and be deliberate about your practice. And going back to the question about perfect practice, that would be a drill. And that's, in Sim Racer Academy, we have this library of practice drills. We have some things where it's just specific, go and work on those things. So, and just to quickly, our goal here is to spend somewhere in the 60 to 90 minute range. And I'm looking and going, wow, we got some really great questions here. So I'm going to move along a little quicker here. Sorry, I'm trying to figure out how to.
Let me just add to that, like the questions on Garage 61 that we don't get to cover, like send them again in Discord, and I'll answer them after the session.
Yes. I think it's Andre. If I want to improve my times, what is the first thing I should focus on in telemetry? Balázs, Ruben, who wants to handle that one first?
I would say look at the delta graph and figure out where you are losing your time, and then I hand it over to Balázs.
Yeah, exactly. You are completely right. Look at the delta. Look at where you're losing the most. Let it be a corner or a phase of the corner, and that's what you need to work on. It's really easy to see from the data that there's a big jump up every braking zone. Then you need to work on that. There is a jump for the data where you lose time on the exits. You need to work on the corner exits. So it's the same as we said about the practice. Identify the most important aspects.
Okay, and kind of all of these are starting to relate together here, which is great. Kevin asked, in Garage 61, I can see that my trail braking is okay, but not as good as I've seen in others. My brake trace usually has a long top, long brake zone, and then at turn in, it drops down too quickly. What kind of practice should I do to improve the bleed off the brake better? So just what I was talking about previously, go into a practice session where you experiment with the timing and rate of release. Again, start releasing, but have a long, slow release. And then do another one where you're coming in and you're more quick with the release. And take a practice session and pick a couple of different corners. Don't try it in every single corner, but pick maybe 2 corners maximum on the track. And just focus on playing with, experimenting with the timing and rate of release. And what you will find out, Kevin, is and everybody else, is that when you do that, you go, oh, when I do this with the brake pedal, the car does that. And when I do that with the brake pedal, the car does this. So the next time I want the car to do this, to do that. Does that make sense? The cool thing is that you've identified this and you're using the data to do that. Play with it. Like take a practice session and just try things where you're like, a good strong initial hit of the brake pedal, and then start to release immediately, but really long and slow. And some people their foot is just not programmed yet. They don't have that sensitivity to be able to go with the brake pedal, as opposed to, it's kind of like, and this kind of goes, Ruben, you asked about the bad habits. If you happen to drive on the road and you, let's say whether you're left foot braking or right foot braking, whatever, you're using the same foot to brake in the sim, you may find that you've developed a bad habit from driving on the road, because you come up to a corner on the road or an intersection or something like that, and it's okay to go kind of just pop your foot off the brake pedal. And now for some amount of time of driving on the road, you've developed that habit of quickly coming off the brake pedal. And it may take some time for you to build the habit or the mental programming to be smoother with your brake release. So take some time to do that.
I know, Ross, this is not a material talk and a technical talk, so you forbid us from doing it. But I'm gonna ask it anyway. Like, and especially Balázs as a sim racer, like, in your experience, like a soft brake or a hard brake, does it make a difference, or is it a personal style?
No, I don't think it makes a difference. At the end of the day, it's just muscle memory, so you can achieve the right thing with both. What it can help to is getting used to it earlier, if you find what works better for you. But at the end, I don't think there's really a difference in it.
So practice makes perfect.
Exactly. And for the practice, I would say that, as Ross said, for this, you can select a corner or two to practice. And this time, I think the active reset is pretty good to do a couple of attempts and then do some laps around it. And also, because we are in sim racing, so it doesn't cost 15,000 to crash a car. Don't be afraid to spin it. Find the limit. If you're looking for that slower release of the brake, do it until you spin. Don't be afraid to do that, because that's how you know, okay, I reached the limit now.
Yeah, and also you can see bad braking. Like if your brake trace goes like this, whereas like in a smooth move, it means you need to focus on just like being like smoother and calmer with coming off the brakes anyway.
Can I, just because, I have my whiteboard and I love my whiteboard. Let's say this is your data trace, and, you're going along, you're at full throttle. I'm kind of just going to draw this as, you're at full throttle. You lift off the throttle for a corner. You come along and you apply the brakes. And the brake could be, boom, like this. It could have, as I guess it was Kevin was saying, could have kind of a flat top and then come off pretty quickly like that. That's one way of doing it. But as you're watching and you're looking at the data, you may find that you do the same kind of a thing like this, and you come along and it looks more like that. And as you were just saying, Ruben, you could end up with something where you go, okay, like this, and you may notice that this, like that. In which case, you've got to work on that fine muscle control to be smooth with it. So that's where the data is just incredibly valuable and powerful, is to be able to look at the details of that. So just experiment, look at data, kind of go, hey, that worked. What does the data look like? And then that didn't work. What does the data look like? You learn something. I think it's Andre again. To what extent is the braking curve dependent on specific hardware, and is there a way to determine which telemetry records are achievable with my hardware? Guys?
I would say, like, Sven Haas, like he's the top rated, if not one of the top rated, like 11K rating. He used to be like a ship captain, and he used to race from sitting on a boat with like a Logitech G29 in moored in a harbor on a crappy internet, and he was winning races and championships. So I would say there's a lot to be achieved with any hardware if you put the work in.
Yeah, I would agree that if there is no fault at your hardware that let's say creates noise in the data, then it is achievable. And as we said before, the muscle memory is what you need to work on. Maybe the better equipment, more expensive, makes it a little bit easier to find the muscle memory, but it's certainly achievable.
Yeah, I find this very depressing, by the way, because I've come to realize that no amount of setup or no amount of equipment will make me like ultimately a very good driver. I have to put the work in.
Yeah. Zayu, I guess is how you pronounce the name. Can sim racing with proper coaching be a complete substitute to the traditional racing career progression from karting? If not, what is sim racing lacking at the moment versus kart racing? Is there a possibility the gap could be bridged in the future? I'll just quickly, not quickly, but here are my thoughts. I've actually been writing something around this. It was kind of like if Lawrence Stroll had come to me when Lance was 4 years old and said, make him a world champion, he would have been in a kart and on a simulator every single day, both. I would not have said, oh, he's only going to do karting or he's only going to do sim racing, because I think there's value in both. And again, we talked about the benefit of sim racing being you can try more things, you can experiment, you can get more laps at less cost, all of that kind of stuff. The one thing that karting has is there's that feeling of yaw that many sims and hard software and hardware, it's just not quite, it's lacking a little bit. So you ask, is there a possibility the gap could be bridged in the future? If somebody figures out how to develop a simulator that can sustain G loads and do it without faking it in other ways, currently $10-20 million simulators can't do it. So if they ever could do that, that could substitute what the karting would do. So that's my opinion of, if I had all the money in the world, I would have somebody in a kart and a simulator. And by the way, I'd also have them on a bicycle and a dirt bike, things that are more about balance. I'd have, all of those things. So anyways, that's my thoughts there.
Ross,
Simon,
cheeky question. If Lawrence Stroll had asked you that question, would Lance be a champion by now?
Good question. I mean, as a coach, all you can do is do everything you possibly can. And at the end of the day, it's up to that individual. And if sometimes, it's true. Lance Stroll gets beaten up sometimes, like by the media and others who go, oh, the only reason he's there is because of his dad. One thing you got to give Lance Stroll credit for is this. He's the son of a billionaire. He could have sat on a couch eating donuts for the rest of his life and never done anything. But the guy is in the gym. He's working out. He's doing everything it takes. Like, he works hard at his job. And I give him maximum points for that. So if Lawrence called me today and said, could you help Lance? I would love that opportunity. So Lawrence, if you're on here and you're like watching this, I'm here. Just like I put my hand up in the past couple of years saying, hey, Sergio, Checo, I'm over here. Anyways, okay. Sidetrack there. Simon asked, are track guides planned as a feature in Garage 61?
Oh, this one's for me, I guess.
Yeah.
I never plan on making them because I much more believe in the power of the community. Plus, I'm very bad at making them. But for me, Garage 61 is like this platform where other people can build on. So I want to bring people the tooling to do what they want and to build the experience they want. And I'm not going to compete with them. So if you are a content creator or a setup shop, then you can use Garage 61 to make and distribute your track guides. And there are some who do, like for instance, Grid and Go and Condi and Ryko and these guys. So I want to offer everybody the opportunity to do this, just like I want to offer the opportunity to do coaching. But there is like almost zero chance that I will do that myself, because I don't want to compete with like the people who actually build on Garage 61 and make it great. So I'm not going to offer coaching, for instance. I think I leave it to the experts.
So I can't help but say, by the way, Sim Racer Academy members get Balázs's track prep guides, and I've created, along with another coach, a series of virtual track walks right now for 15 North American tracks that are available on speedsecrets.com. They're quite in-depth, meaning like more than an hour, sometimes 2.5 hours long of video, that content of every little detail you can imagine about a track. So either one of those things, those are available. Ruben, we might talk about how we can combine those things. So
yeah.
Another one for you, Ruben. Thomas asked, will Garage 61 be using AI in the future, either for user technique development or from software development?
Oh, so AI, it's a very hype thing. So I don't want to say like, yes, we're going to do AI, because everybody wants AI these days. I much more believe in the power of experts and the power of like real race engineers. And I try to put this knowledge in there. Not to say that we're not going to use like statistics and techniques in that, because one, it's not an open secret that one of the goals I have for Garage 61 is to do proper endurance planning and life strategy. As part of that, there is a very big prediction aspect as well, to like predict how the race is going to go and what the competitors are going to do, and that's where AI fits in. Will we have like an AI chatbot where you can ask like, what should I improve? And it says like, you're crap at braking. Not anytime soon, unless I find many more hours a day. But I would rather have like the real reason behind it, like not some like ChatGPT who figures out like a plausible answer. I would rather have like proper algorithms in there that can really help you say what is going on, rather than a statistical guess. Because, and then that's the last thing I'll say. Like, usually when you brake too late, it's easier to say like, well, just brake earlier, or vice versa. But that's not the real answer. The real answer is your car positioning was wrong, or you were doing something completely wrong, and that is why you couldn't brake later or earlier, or whatever your problem is. So for me, the more interesting question is not like what led up to making the mistake that you have to fix. And I'm not sure that AI can answer that question. You need an expert for that.
Bingo. I love it. And by the way, rather than saying you're crap at braking, I prefer the coaching approach would be, you kind of suck at braking. I'm joking. Okay. And another question for you right away, Ruben. Matt asked, will we see alternate wet leaderboards on Garage 61 anytime soon?
Well, you can search for them. So if you go to laps search and then put a filter on like the track wetness, you will have it. One thing I did like consider is like adding the ability to create multiple rankings per team. So right now you have like the team records, and I plan to add like multiple of them. So you can define a filter that says like all the team records for the wet laps, or all the team records for like this specific track under these conditions. So you can create your own little rankings in there. The global ranking, I'm not sure. A wet lap is a difficult one anyway, because there is no such thing as two the same wet laps.
Yeah. Balázs, this one's for you. Alessandro asked, I'm in a team and we have some massively quick guys. I think that says 9,000 plus. But besides having them coach the rest of us, what do you see would be the most effective approach to transferring those skills to the rest of us? Practice drills, telemetry approaches, whatever comes to mind.
I would say definitely analyzing data, and I actually saw another question regarding this that was asking about how to find, the last couple of tenths rather than looking for the bigger mistakes or bigger time gains like a second or two. And I assume that is the case here as well. And for that, I would say that this is the point where, okay, you are comparing telemetry, and this is the point where you need to really think about why the telemetry looks like that. So you need to start to understand what is happening to the car. Why is the other guy doing that? So for example, just the yaw of the car or some tire slip as well. You need to consider those and not just look at, okay, he has this tiny bit of difference in the trail braking, but you need to think about why is that there? What does that create in the car? What kind of different balance that results in, and why does that gain time? I think that is the cool thing about the data, that you can do this, and that is also the hard and annoying part, that this is how you can find the last end, that you can't just at this point you can't just apply the, okay, he's doing something different, I will copy it. You will need to really think about why.
And I love that, in that the question that I ask more than anything else is why. And I think until you understand the why, it's pretty hard to fix. And and it actually kind of leads a little bit into this next question from Vladi, who says, how do you suggest improving consistency? I can be quick over a lap or two during a race, usually in the middle of a race, but then it's hard to get consistency lap after lap. My laps vary within a few seconds. And this goes back to something we talked about earlier about looking at data and going, where is it? Like, first of all, identifying, where is it? Like, is it inconsistency in every single corner, or is it one particular section of track or one particular corner? So looking back at your data afterwards and trying to figure out, where does the inconsistency come from? And if you look at data, and even throughout the race, you look at it and go, where is that? Is it, braking points, minimum speed, back to power? Like, try to identify that. That's the very first step. And then, Balázs, you got some thoughts on that, I'm sure.
Yeah, I always have a really good practice there for this. If you are aiming to work on consistency, and that's, let's say your fastest lap on a track is 1:30, and you said that your lap time varies by a second or two, then you go out for a stint that you're going to drive, and you are not going to aim for, driving as fast as possible. You're going to aim to go first 2 seconds slower. And you will aim to do that every lap, be at that mark, and be able to achieve that. Okay, then you see that you can achieve that, and you bring that down, quarter of a second, half a second, whatever you feel comfortable with. And step by step, you're going to learn to expect what the car does better every lap. And that's going to also help your consistency on the long run without, really pushing the car at first, but also still working on the consistency.
Ironically, I find myself getting faster when I say, like, oh, now let's just focus on just doing some laps and taking it a bit slower, and then time found.
Yeah. Alessandro asked, more on technique. What is the best way to fix overdriving the fronts on entry mid-corner? I can't break that habit for the life of me. Alessandro, I'm going to say one thing and then hand it to Balázs to fill in here or tell you the best thing. But one of the things that I'm really big on is trigger words or phrases. And every corner, I was having a conversation yesterday with somebody who was going to be racing at Laguna Seca. And I told him sort of what my trigger words were for each corner. And, certain corners are attack, certain corners are flow, certain corners are exit, certain corners are momentum. And so one of the things that I would suggest is you practice, and every corner, as you're approaching it, you go exit speed, exit speed, exit speed. Because sometimes we get so focused on corner entry speed that we forget about the exit. So if you're reminding yourself, I got to be focused on my exit speed. Sometimes that will help the overdriving on the entry. Balázs, you got some more on that?
Yeah, I think pretty much the same drill as before, or similar drill that I can recommend for that. And it's basically what you explained. So yeah, overdriving entry means you are losing a lot of time on the exit, of course. So that means you need to have a better focus on that. So again, go out for a stint. You don't really care about the lap times, but what you're looking for is maybe you have your delta up, and that you're going to start doing laps, underdriving the entry, and focusing on the exit. And what you always want to see is, of course, that you will start getting time on the exits. And you do that, you get comfortable with it, and then you start pushing the entries of the corner more. I think it's a great drill for
that. Next question is from, I'm going to mess up the name, I'm sure, but Karamidaru. I rating is just a number, but out of curiosity, what I rating do the hosts have? And I'll tell you, mine is like 0 or minus 12,000 or something like that, because I never do any sim racing. I never get on and actually do it. I'm always coaching and never actually doing it. So if you look me up, I'll be like, yeah. Balázs?
I'm somewhat over 8,000 at the moment.
Okay. Ruben, you want to?
Yeah, and I hover around 2,000, and I wish it was more, but these days, if I'm lucky, I get to spend 1 hour a week in the sim. So I miss competitive racing, but I spend too much time building Garage 61 and answering emails, and I love it, but I wish I had a bit more time for racing.
Same, yeah, and same. So then, Karamidaru asked, I brake natural from 100% from 13 years of other sims. I dive bomb and love front wheel drive, but with 100% brake in iRacing, not good. Tried multiple coaches, no help. Help. Not sure exactly what the question is. Do you get that, Balázs? Do you want?
Well, I'm not sure how all the front wheel drives work on iRacing, but I think this might be about locking the brakes, because I know that on some other sim racing titles you can go 100% brake without locking up, and iRacing at least used to. Now they changed it a bit, but it used to do that 100%. It means that you are locking up the tires, or going into ABS, which is of course a good approach, because in real life there's no 100%. But the 100% is how strong your leg is. So yeah, it's about that. I assume that it means that he still tries to go 100% and still locks up, and that how it's possible to fix that, which is a pretty good question. So it's not the more finer motor skills of the leg, of relazing the trail braking. It's more just how you can find the limit. And I think a practice drill for that can be that you don't even need to go out for the track with this. You say that okay, you roll a random number, and let's say that's 80%, and that you want to, without any help, close your eyes, and you will try to hit 80% of the maximum of your brake force, and you see how close you got, and then you repeat with a different number or the same until you can really learn that. And the other part of that is, I think, in some cars you need to be a little bit searching for that peak of braking, which takes a little bit more to develop, and that I think that requires a bit slower ramping of the brakes, not really hitting it that hard. But the first drill, I think, can have that as well. Just identifying what is the 80% or whatever you need without looking up.
Yeah, sounds like a case of a very bad habit to me. So if all else fails, like wire up your simulator to give yourself like an electrical shock if you brake at 100%. And if that doesn't help, well.
Yeah. One other thing I'll throw in there is sometimes we overbrake by doing that, because we're so focused on where we're going to brake and how late we're going to brake. And this is one of the things that I really spend a lot of time coaching with, is having drivers, when they're approaching a corner, look for where they're going to end their braking. So the end of braking, I call the EOB, end of braking. And because as you're approaching the brake zone, if you're looking to the end of braking point, you will naturally start to brake at a certain point and with a certain amount of pressure to get you to that end of braking point. But if you're overly focused on, I got to brake at the 300 marker or whatever it is, you tend to get there and go boom on the pedal. So that's another thing just to practice is go and do a session of focusing on just being aware of where your end of braking point is in a corner. Sometimes that fixes some of that, and I know that's sort of related but different. So and I'm going to try to rush through a few more here because we are getting along here, and we're probably going to be getting close to the end of being able to put a question in here. And by the way, if we don't get to every single one of them, we probably are going to do another one. And by the way, if you really are committed to this, we're going to do another one later today. You probably saw on the sign up thing. You could actually join there as well, but you also can send messages to Ruben. You can send messages to Balázs. You can send messages to me. Anyways, so Jay asked, how do you find sim racing skills translate to real life? Do you see students with sim experience do well in real cars? What are common mistakes people make when transitioning? I touched on this early on, but the skills translate fantastic. Really, the one thing, and this is something that I've just noticed a trend, and it's not every single time, but a trend is a lot of sim racers, when they get into real cars, they tend to come off the brakes a little earlier. And what they do in doing that is they kind of, it's almost like they want a little bit of understeer on the corner entry. Why? Because they sense the limits through the steering wheel, because that's where you get a lot of the limit feeling in a sim. Because you come into a corner in a sim, most sims don't have the ability to sense yaw very well. So you come in there and you learn to sense the limits of the car off the front tires. So you kind of want a little of that. A lot of drivers who have come from karting and not done a lot of sim racing, karters tend to rotate the cart into a corner. So they sense the car a little bit more off the rear tires. So they tend to trail brake a little bit more and want the car to kind of do this, get a little of that rotation on the entry. Neither one, it's not like, oh, that's better than the other one. They're just a little bit different. And again, this is just a trend where I've seen a lot of drivers who have come from a really strong sim racing background. They want a car that has a hint of understeer on corner entry, and their driving technique will generate a little bit of that as well. And then if a driver has not done a lot of sim racing but come from karting, they tend to want the car to have a lot of rotation on the entry. So they'll tend to also trail brake more. Matt asks, what tips do you have for when you hit a ceiling in terms of lap times to break through and get to the next level? Balázs, you touched a little bit on this earlier on, but anything else you want to add?
Yeah, of course, the looking for the details was one of that. One thing I can say, maybe try something different in sim racing. You know, if you are stuck on a car or a track combination, try a different track, even maybe a different car. You know, see how those things that you learned apply there, and it's maybe going to give you a hint of how you can apply that better on the original car. I think that's what I would say for that.
Yeah, I had a sim racer that I worked with a few years ago who seemed to be stuck there, and they were racing primarily in one car in this league, and I said, go drive a faster car, like go drive a Formula 1 car, like drive really fast cars, and then when you come back into this slower car, and I can't remember, it might have been a Spec Miata, can't remember exactly, MX-5, can't remember, but all of a sudden everything kind of slowed down for him. And so there was some value in doing that. So yeah, I agree. And then sometimes the other way, like if you're consistently driving really fast cars, drive a slow car, because then you can think, you have a little bit more time to think about those basics that we talked about and just fine tuning them and getting a little bit of that. So Vladi asked, can you recommend some tips on improving mental focus? get into the zone kind of focus. Huge topic. Here's the thing, Lottie, is do you think that Max Verstappen loses his focus in a Formula One car as much as you, me, and everybody else? You would think that no. You would think that no. One of the things that makes him so great is he never loses his focus. By the way, it's one of the reasons why he does sim racing. But here's the thing. The very, very best drivers in the world, they lose their focus just as much as anybody else. The difference is they regain it like that. And so one of the things that I highly recommend for focus is you have what I call a pre-planned thought. It's a trigger word or a phrase. It could be eyes up, look ahead. For me, my focus trigger is car dancing. I love the feeling of a car on the edge, just like I'm dancing with the car. And to me, if I can be in the middle of a race and, it could be, hey, I made a mistake in turn 1 and now I'm entering turn 2 thinking about the mistake I made back there. I go car dancing and it brings me back into the moment of driving. So things like that. I would highly, highly, highly recommend everybody here, you have a focus trigger, a word, a phrase that the second you say it, it brings you back into the moment. Could be slow hands. It could be smooth hands, eyes up, look ahead. It could be car dancing. It could be anything that you want, but it's something that brings you back into that. And most drivers tell me, and my experience is, maintaining focus on a sim is actually harder than in real life. And for that reason, it's a great place to practice regaining your focus. Max asked, and I'm pretty sure this is Max Verstappen. I'm pretty sure he's on here listening to this. So, hey, Max. When developing or tuning your setup for something like the D24, what fuel load would you work with? Ooh, Balázs, go.
Well, I would say you would want to start your practice with full fuel most of the time, except for the specific time when you're working for qualifying. But yeah, so that comes back to what we said earlier on how to practice for a race and identifying what you will do the most. And in Daytona, what you will do the most is drive the car from full fuel to 0 over a stint. So what you need to practice most is how the car evolves over a stint. So that's definitely not going to be the favorite for how to practice in terms of practice time, but the best thing to do is a stint because you can feel how the car changes over the stint. So yeah, I think for that, starting from full fuel is what you need for an endurance race, especially for the length of Daytona. Because I don't know. So if you are driving a GT3 car, I think that's about 20-something stints of full fuel. You will have basically one stint that is not full fuel, and that's usually at the end. Same for the prototypes; they drive over 30 stints. Driving from half fuel would not be worth it that much because that's not what is relevant for you most of the time. Maybe for that final stint where you have the splash, but practice what is going to happen the most. And once you are comfortable with driving a full stint, it's going to be good for the race as well. But it's also good for setup adjustments. You have an expectation how the car will change during the stint. So once you make a change, it might be enough to do just half a stint, still starting from full fuel, but only do half of it. And you will feel that, okay, this car is already better, or that, okay, this is going to evolve in a way that you don't like it.
Yeah. Plus, if you're capable of handling it, the car at its worst with cold tires and heavy fuel, it's only going to get better anyway. So.
Couple of questions from two different people about anyone use iRacing Active Reset to practice a single corner sector, and is Active Reset on iRacing good or bad? I find that corner entry always depends so heavily on the exit of previous corner, so simply resetting to corner entry does a disservice rather than connecting to the whole lap. Balázs, you touched on this and talked about this earlier on about it's a great tool, but don't overdo it, correct?
Exactly, yes. I think that might have been the question I saw as well.
Okay. We're going to try to hustle here. We got quite a few more questions in the next, I'm going to say 13 minutes. Gabriel asks, what are bad habits in real life driving that you have seen in top level sim racers? Balázs, you've worked with an Indy 500 winner. You've worked with some other top level real world drivers.
It's hard to say. I mean, they don't really have bad habits to say that, that you won't really see them brake earlier, or, they don't use enough braking. They do have all a specific style that comes from the cars that they drive. For example, iRacing notoriously likes trail braking a lot, very long time, basically until the apex, and then you get back on throttle immediately. And depending on the car that they drive, that it's probably not there. It might not be how that car handles, and that's not a mistake, because that's how the car that they drive in whatever they race is how it works and how it goes fast. And getting them to be fast in the simulator is more of an adaptation than driver technique coaching. It's just helping them adapt, and I would say that it's just getting them to drive the same way that people figure out how to drive the sim fast.
Okay, and sorry, but we're gonna have to don't bother putting any more questions in because we're running out of time here. So Philippe asked, and this is kind of a long one here, but Philippe, I'm quite effective at using Garage 61 to get me from, say, 2 to 3 seconds off when learning a completely new track to within a few tenths. I just get increasingly faster laps and work on the biggest delta jump. Great. But when I'm within 1/10 of every corner, I hit a wall. Everything feels too subtle, and I start fearing I've hit the limits of my innate lack of talent. Is there anything you instantly look at lap that is within a few tenths other obvious delta jumps? So I think the question is, and Balázs, you touched real quickly on, when you get that last tenth or so. Philippe, the first thing I'm going to say is keep an open mind. The way humans learn is we don't learn on a curve. We don't have a learning curve. We have jumps. And sometimes when you're on that, what feels like a bit of a plateau, it's your brain processing and getting things to that point where we're comfortable here and our brain is ready. If you're not frustrated and if you're kind of open-minded, all of a sudden you go, boom, and you get another little jump. And sometimes it's that last little bit comes from just having that open mind to that. And I will say, from experimenting. Again, you have the opportunity to experiment in the sim. So that's the first thing I'd say. And Balázs, you got anything to add to that?
No, I think that's really the point that we talked about before, is looking for the details and thinking about the whys in that situation. Think, why that small difference in braking is there, small difference in throttle, maybe a little bit at the steering as well. Think about what the car does, and try to work based on that. It always has a cause and an effect.
And Thomas asked, do you have any advice for mentality at the start of a race stint to reduce nerves, mistakes? Thomas, the biggest thing that was a big kind of aha moment for me was I would get nervous for the races, and like every driver, you get nervous. And the day that I realized that that's a good thing, it changed my outlook on being nervous. If you're not nervous, you don't care. And if you don't care, you're not going to perform at your peak. So accepting that you're going to feel nervous and go, that's okay. Now, if it starts to have a negative impact on the way you're performing, breathing is a big thing. And by the way, if you did mental imagery and you think that, well, how is mental imagery or visualizing, how is that any different than practicing in the sim? It is different, because you can practice in your mind being perfect. And I'm sorry, even Max Verstappen on a sim is not perfect. So, but if you close your eyes, relax, breathe, and pretend you're on, you're at a race start or the beginning of a stint or whatever it is, and you're like, and you feel yourself relaxing and getting into that comfort zone. For every driver, it's a little different. Some drivers need to be ramped up. Some drivers need to be energized. Some drivers need to be calm and zen-like. So imagine yourself in that state of mind where you're at your best, and breathe and breathe. When we hold our breath, there's only 2 times in our life that we hold our breath: when we're underwater or when we're scared, right? And when we hold our breath, it's a trigger to our brain that goes, something's wrong. Fire, flight, freeze, whatever. And so if you're breathing and you deliberately practice breathing, and you practice your breathing while you're doing mental imagery or visualization, you are programming yourself to breathe in those stressful situations. So first off, accept it, and then mentally practice breathing and being relaxed and calm and in that state of mind that you want. Alessandro asked, I know it doesn't work like that, but in your coaching experience, where do students find the last second? Is it wildly personal, or does it tend to be a few common mistakes? Big question. Balázs, you got some thoughts there?
Yeah, I think firstly, it's the great answer that it depends. It is very different for everyone. But I would say that one common thing is being smooth, and that's the last part usually, the smoothness. With whatever part, it could be the braking, the steering, or the throttle. It is always the last part that people are looking for.
And the one thing I'll add to that is looking for speed in all the wrong places. It's trying to go fast where you should be having a little patience. All driving is a compromise. You compromise a little speed here to get more over here, or you compromise some here to get some here. And I'm going to say that last little bit often comes from trying to get the speed in the wrong place. Like I said, it could be corner entry. You're like trying to carry too much corner entry speed, and therefore it's hurting your exit off the corner. Or it could be the opposite, where you overslow so much, thinking I got to get this big exit, that you overslow, and now you're starting to accelerate from a too low a speed. So I would say trying to find the speed in the wrong places. And I know that you're going, well, tell me where the right places are. That's a big one. Use Garage 61 to figure it out. So Adam asked, I used to do a lot of sim racing in VR. The spatial audio in the Oculus headset was fantastic for working out which tire was locking. Moving back to screens, in bracket, eye strain, I haven't found a good audio solution that recreates this. Am I missing something? I've tried I can't remember how this is written, 4.15 or 1/5. Sorry, I don't know how it's written here, and I can't read it here, but it doesn't sound the same. Balázs, you got some thoughts on setup, audio setup? And I know we're not going to get into details of that. So
I don't really think I have anything particular for that, because I haven't really tried VR before, so I don't have a great comparison. And unfortunately, I don't know if I can have with that in terms of audio setup. I use pretty basic ones with headphones, and that's it. So I haven't gone into detail with that. And one thing I can have with tail locking up is something that people do often in the simulator, is turn up the volume for tire noise and turn the engine down a bit to give that contrast. That can help a little bit.
Last question. Abdul asks, and this is an interesting one. As a driver who is very interested in coaching, when do you ask why? And when do I say drive stupid? And I'll come back to that. I'm an overthinker, and the why helps me a lot, but I struggle sometimes where it starts to paralyze me. So it's the paralysis by analysis thing, where you overthink things, and finding the right balance between thinking and not thinking. And one of the mental model I have, and by the way, I use this phrase, so you've obviously picked this up from me before. Oh, I think you did. Sometimes I'll say to a driver who I realize is overthinking, and being too analytical, I'll just say, drive, stupid. And I don't mean that as calling the person stupid, but turn your brain off. Just drive. You've practiced, you've built the mental programming. Now it's time to kind of let go and let all of that just happen. And that's a trigger phrase to do that. And one of the things that I recommend to drivers is that you do mental imagery or visualization to build the mental programming. And in your mind, you see that, you've thought through, you've looked at everything, you've looked at the data, you've thought about this, you've asked the questions why, you've dug into all of that, but then you go, drive stupid. Let go and trust yourself that you have done the homework, you've done your homework, and you've got a clear picture of what it is that you want to do. Now it's time to just let go. And I will say, the very, very best drivers in the world, here's what when I look at the top level, IndyCar champions, Formula One, sports car, NASCAR, they have this ability to be very analytical up to a certain point, and then it's like they kind of turn the switch off. And having kind of almost like a mental model of this, and maybe not a switch, but you kind of go, okay, I'm turning the analytical mind down, and I'm just going to drive, trusting my abilities. And then, it could be in the race, you're going, struggling with something, turn it up a little bit, think a little bit more about your driving. And then it could be, okay, now just, it's the last few laps of the race, no time to think, just do, turn it down, right down. And then after the race, you're looking at Garage 61, you're looking at your data, you're going through and you're going, turn it up, and you learn all this stuff. And so imagine having that kind of like that knob on the side of your head where you can dial up the analytical mind and turn it back down again. And that's a really cool thing. And I'm going to kind of end this on that note, because how cool is this that we learn from sim racing these things that I'll guarantee you will help you in everything else that you do. So it's really cool. Sim racing is awesome, and it's real. I always think that if you ever watched the old Seinfeld show, there was a scene where Kramer was always like, it's real, baby, kind of like that thing. Like I go, sim racing, it's real. So with that, Ruben, thank you so much for making this happen. Balázs, the way you coach and what you've done for Sim Racer Academy is blown my mind, how good you are. And most importantly, thank you to all of you who have joined in here tonight, whatever it is. And this is really cool. This is an amazing community. So thank you for that. If you want more information, simraceracademy.com. And in my main site of speedsecrets.com, we have things like I do master classes, and I have these playbook videos, and I have virtual track walk videos, and all sorts. And just launched today, I have a couple of Sim Racer t-shirts on in the merch store that are kind of cool. Like, my other car is a simulator. I think that's a cool saying. So anyways, thank you, Balázs. Any last thing, Ruben?
Thank you, everyone, for being here. And thank you, Ruben, for putting this on.
And thanks for being part of the Garage 61 community, because it stands with all the people sharing their data and learning together.
Community, that's cool. Thank you. So thanks, everybody. Keep learning, keep having fun. Thanks.